The state of the world is terrible right now. The stock market is plummeting. Nazis are back on the streets. And there have been 3 50 Shades of Grey movies. I don't think I can take all these horrific events. I'm in dire need of escapism.
Escapism, you say? What kind of escapism are you looking for?
I don't know. Something ridiculous. Something like dinosaurs with laser guns.
Well, in that case, I've got just the story for you. You'll love the recently released second installment of Matthew Donald's Megazoic series, The Primeval Power. This young adult sci-fi novel has just been released on Amazon for print and for Kindle. And wait, is this one a real ad, Donald?
Yeah?
We're making an actual ad for your actual book that our listeners can buy with actual money.
Wait, are you saying none of our other ads have been real? I just finished working out with the Writer's Workout Training Program before we started. And eating a meal of cerebral-stimulating beans, of course.
I guess they are all real. Did you use cuisine de soie to cook those beans out of curiosity?
Nah, Gaston Crayon de Papier refused to merge his store cooking enterprise with our specialized beans.
That's a shame.
Yeah, it is. Anyways, back to the ad, David.
Alright, I guess we're doing this. In this sequel to Matthew Donald's well-received debut novel, The World of Dinosaurs with Laser Guns gets even weirder. Cortan, the hero of the first book, has proven himself to be a master of technology, but he might have found his perfect counter in a mysterious dinosaur named Nevissa, who uses witch-like powers and magical soldiers called Shades to enact her diabolical plans.
Whoa, now there's dinosaurs with magic!
Perhaps there is. It even baffles the dinosaurs within the story. Cortan realizes his skills with tech may be useless against this foe, but since Nevissa plans to summon a super-powerful army of dinosaurs from a civilization eons past, Cortan better figure out how to fight her fast.
Wow, that sounds like just the escapism I need! Thank you, glad to have helped. As author of this newly released book, I hope all of you enjoy. It's got all the dinosaurs, all the laser guns, all the banter, and all the characters you love and tolerate from the first book.
Tolerate?
I'm nothing if not honest, David. Buy Megazoic, The Primeval Power on Amazon today. Available on both print and Kindle.
Oh boy.
Alright. I don't know, I thought that'd be a good one for this.
No, yeah, you're right. It's a good one.
Fitting for this episode as well.
Well, yes, quite.
Alright, anyways.
Didn't I do...
Yes.
Oh my gosh, didn't I have a song idea for the sequel thing?
Well, poo. Next time, I don't know.
On the sequel to this episode about sequels.
The prequel episode.
That doesn't work. Anyway, moving on.
The spin-off episode. What? Who cares? Welcome, fellow nerds. And welcome to you. Shut up. To another episode of The Writ, the show that claims to be about writting, but ignores classic literature like Moby Dick or Lord of the Flies, and instead mainly talks about movies and TV shows. We know exactly what we are, don't we, David? And what is that, I wonder?
You know, we know exactly what we are, but no one else needs to know, so we'll move on.
Yeah.
Anyways, regular segments. What will we rip off from this month?
What is this thing? What's the point of anything, David? We're all just infinitesimal specks in an indifferent universe.
Wow, existential crisis. Love it.
We're all gonna die, and the universe is gonna die, and then eventually there'll be nothing but cold, dead silence forever. I read a book this month, David. I actually read a book, third time.
Oh my god!
Third time in this series that has lasted almost 2 years. I'm such a good author. I'm so good. I'm so good. All right. I read Cherie Priest's The Bone Shaker, a steampunk zombie novel. In the early parts of the Civil War, this is the plot of it basically, rumors of gold in the Pacific Northwest prompts this inventor to build a great drilling machine. A big steampunk one with a bunch of steam and stuff.
Steam and punk?
I don't know. Steam and punk. There's a band on top of it. It's like performing all the punk music they want. But tragedy ensues, when the music turns out to be not good, but also when the machine malfunctions, destroying much of Seattle. Well, that's no big loss. But
well, I mean, considering that Starbucks and a bunch of other coffee companies like Seattle's Best Coffee came from there, it might be.
I don't know. I don't care about coffee. Come on, you know. That's not like I work at a coffee shop or anything.
This is the Civil War.
Anyways. Yeah, it's in the Civil War. It's early parts of the Civil War, yes.
No.
And under a blight plague.
Which means that they're still pretty inhabited by Native Americans at this point, right? Because we didn't expand that far.
It's alternate history.
We didn't expand that far west until later. Anyway, moving on. Destroyed much of Seattle.
And then there's a blight plague from underneath. This is where all the Native Americans went. They became zombies. It turns the area into an undead wasteland.
Oh my gosh. I hope we don't offend listeners with that one. Moving on.
I mean, to be fair, I'm assuming the blight plague doesn't care about the race. White men were effective. Native folks were affected. Anyone and anything.
Even the trees.
Oh yeah, undead trees. Can't get worse than that.
Hence rising.
Okay, sorry. Seriously. An undead tree. Is that any different from just a dead tree? If a tree was undead, what would it do?
Yeah, no, I got nothing. I got nothing.
It's not like it would move. It couldn't move when it was alive either.
Won't grow anything, I guess. No new leaves.
But it would still somehow grow, I guess? The branches would grow.
I don't know. We don't know how it would move, so it couldn't really infect other things. I think it's the last bastion against this undead plague.
Maybe what would happen was that it would have to spread via the pollination of unwitting insects and birds that spread to other trees. Okay, this is my new story. I'm writing a story about undead trees. All right, moving on.
Inspired by the Bone Shaker. This is why you're ripping it off. Okay.
All right, yes. I'm gonna rip that off. And also, anyways, so in this plot, all right, basically the adventurer's widow and her son have to return because of certain circumstances, and then thus begins an adventure of airships and pirates and an actual little bit of American history sprinkled all throughout this nonsense. It's just like a light dabbing of a salt shaker, you know. That's what I'll rip off. Like, you know, I think it's cool. Like, if you have a story that's like mostly nonsense, if you dab just a little bit of real stuff in it, it adds credibility to it.
Sure.
Like, not just like alternate history. Like, the fact that like in Lord of the Rings, that a lot of the way that those medieval kingdoms work function a lot like real medieval kingdoms, even though they're all fictional. That adds credibility to it. Like, I do that a little bit, like with all the dinosaur species in Megazoic are real. And some of the ways that some of them are categorized, I'm not going to spoil it, but basically, based on details later, the way they're categorized with each other is accurate as well. So, but, you know, it's a nice thing to do as writers, to add a little bit of credibility to your story that might just be ridiculous overall. So,
absolutely fair.
I don't know. That's what I got. That's what I'm going to rip off. I don't know. Do you have anything else to say to that, other than just sounds fair? I mean, if not, that's fine. Usually we have more of a back and forth, but I guess we don't.
Usually we have more of a back and forth, but I'm not quite sure how to, back and forth with you on this one.
I just explained my point so succinctly that you just have nothing to add.
Well, I mean, come on. Like, you've done a very good job of stating your case. What more could I do except screw it up?
At least you know your place, David. I create the stuff and you screw it up. I'm so mean to you. I'm sorry. I'll get you a pizza when you come back.
This is from the guy who has launched fake missiles at...
I haven't done that in a long time.
You haven't done that in a long time.
One time is too many, though, to be fair. What are you going to rip off?
All right. Well, the biggest thing from this month is Marvel's Daredevil. I mean, I tend to write stories that are, similar environments to what I grew up in, which is suburbia. It's not exactly inner city life. We don't deal with gang violence too much. You don't deal with major tragedies all the time. It's very irregular. But in inner cities, these things do happen quite a lot.
It's much more common. Well, it's because there's so many more people smushed into so much littler of an area.
That's true. So, that definitely has an effect.
I think that's one of the main reasons.
There was one thing, and this wasn't actually the point that I'm going to rip off about it, but just like the idea that all of these sirens that go off in the middle of the night in New York City probably wake the tourists, but the people that live there just get used to it, right? They know what's going to happen, don't you remember, so they don't really react the same way as somebody who is unfamiliar with that. Right.
Anyway, don't you remember in the animated TMNT, the CGI one, where Raphael was like, I can't even sleep anymore without the sound of the subway going over my head. Like I
did not remember that line, but yes, I suppose that makes a lot of sense.
He says that to Casey when he's like, I guess if I could go anywhere other than the city, I could go too, but I could never leave this place. And then he mentions the subway thing. It's like, I mean, they're in the sewers, so they're above the subway. No, the subway's above them, so.
It'd be kind of like saying for us, like airplanes and stuff like that, trains and whatnot.
Right. You're by
As some listeners probably realize that they've heard trains going near my apartment in many previous recording sessions. But anyway.
Or construction.
So yeah, it's a good look at what happens in city life, and that may be useful later to branch out and use a different setting every once in a while. I also have to throw out there that I really, really liked Arrow, and consider that, we've already mentioned how much I like the Arrowverse and that show in particular. I have to throw out, there are so many freaking similarities between those two shows. Like, oh my god. Both of them have a different name in the season than what they'll come to be known as. So for the Arrow,
you're right.
He was called the Hood for much of the first season. And for Daredevil, he was called the Devil of Hell's Kitchen for almost all of the first season. The first season's main villain has the same goal as the hero, but they have this extraordinarily crazy, practically genocidal plan to do it. Small spoiler alert.
Wonder which one's the hero.
Exactly. Both of them are stupid good at play acting like their civilian form can't do anything, but they kick some major butt.
Of course.
They both involve other people in what started as a one-man crusade. I mean, and there are just so many different things like that. And they're both realistic because neither of them have, typical superpowers. Yeah, you could argue that Daredevil's heightened senses are superhuman, especially considering he's missing one.
Right.
But other than that, I mean, his body is simply honed to a very peak level, as with Oliver Queen. So, and I do love that he walks around so confidently, yet he's supposedly, technically blind. That's just so fun.
Right.
I don't know if I want to write a story about somebody with a disability or something like that, because
it'd be interesting to work with.
Well, it'd be interesting, but I don't have that experience. But realistically,
you could really figure out how to get in the mind. I don't know if you know this, but I'm not a dinosaur. You are, or you look like one. But I still write about dinosaurs.
But you also know far more about dinosaurs than I know about living.
Well, that's why you study blind people.
Yeah, I suppose that is an opportunity. We have said that research is never bad. Research is never a bad thing to do. So it might be useful later, and especially because it looks really pretty. But anyway, that's the big thing I'm going to rip off this month. I've got a couple of other things that I'm watching.
Right. Well, what I want to say real quick, though, before I forgot.
Yeah, go ahead.
Daredevil, fiddly enough, is the first Netflix show that came with descriptions for people who want to watch it who are blind.
I suppose that's entirely fitting.
Fitting, and I'm assuming intentional. But,
yeah,
presumably. That's just kind of cool. So, basically, the dialogue scenes are exactly the same, but, when there's, action going on, they have, a narration or something. It would be like a radio show. You'd probably get someone else to, set it up for you, and then you just sit there and listen to it.
It works. So. Anyways, that's enough for me on that particular thing, because none of the other shows that I've been watching have much, really notable, I want to rip this off to talk about yet. So, anyway, we'll move on then to what we at the Writ have writ.
Well, let's see. Something happened. I forgot. Let's see. I don't know. I have to think about. Oh, that's right. Premium Powers published. Oh my god, that joke's back. Every time I get a book published, I'm gonna do that exact same joke. It's gonna be just as funny every time. Hopefully,
where's that? It's welcome. Anyway,
no, you're supposed to laugh at my jokes. You're supposed to be a sycophant.
Well, being a sycophant is one thing, but we're supposed to provide differing opinions and cooperate with each other. So I don't have to say yes to everything.
David, no, I demand you kiss my ass at every opportunity. I have such a small ego; it needs all the stroking it can get. My self-esteem.
Yeah, well, my ego needs some of the deflating it can get.
That's why you let me insult you. That you told me. I mean it all in good jest.
No, it's not just you, but anyway.
It's all in good jest.
You also picked a horrible time to do that because I was taking a drink. Thanks.
Wow, I'm sure it's... I try.
Anyways.
Okay. Alright, so... Primal Powers published.
So you published that, obviously. Yep. What else have you done?
Well, I guess we'll just gloss over that. No, it's fine. That's basically all there is to it.
I'm not glossing over it. You've already promptly put enough attention on it.
It's true. We did have a whole ad on it. Never mind. Okay, so... I forgot already. This show's so memorable. Alright, so... basically, I made some good progress, though, in sales for the other one. The big one is... progress is potential progress. But there's this organization that sells things to museums and gift shops all around the Western U.S. and we've contacted them, and they're interested in it, and they thought it looked really cool, and they're looking over right now to make sure it goes through the review process. If that goes through, that'd be huge, because then they would be the ones giving it to gift shops.
Yeah.
It'd be amazing. Like, I really hope that works.
Well, and
like,
the question becomes, what do royalties look like in that model? And you don't need to go into detail on a podcast. It's sensitive
I don't
information.
know. I have no idea. I have no experience in this. Maybe I could do something like I do before. But at the same time, though, I think the money would be kind of tempting. So maybe I could just...
I mean, you are entitled to at least some profits on what you've spent so many years honing. Your craft.
Right, the only reason why I didn't for like the local stuff here is because I wanted to entice them to sell it more. But if they're already interested in
it,
then
essentially what you've done is you've curried a little bit of favor by letting them profit on it. Now it's your turn to profit on your original intellectual
now
property.
that it's bigger and that more things are accepting. Oh yeah, speaking of which,
now you've published a sequel.
Right,
come on.
Right, okay, I guess that's true. I need to stop being so humble.
Well, it's not like you need help being less humble, but
yeah, it's true. Kiss my ass, David. But like not like in a way that's like I don't care what you're saying. I mean literally. I mean not literally either. Oh my, you know what I mean?
Maybe I do. Actually, you just gave me one idea to talk about for what I have writ/worked on, but I'll get to that later. Go ahead.
Of course. Real quick, one last thing I was going to say though. It's also the Sam Noble Museum in Norman, Oklahoma. They want 10 copies, and that's the first out-of-state museum. It's slowly getting out there.
Well, I mean, the Western U.S., when you say Western, you mean like everything that's west of, say, the Missouri River?
I don't think it's to be for the entire Western U.S. I think it's just like this area of states, like Colorado, Utah, Wyoming, Arizona, New Mexico. Just like a big dino country here, this area. It's like this kind of collection. The Four Corners states, I guess, but also Wyoming and maybe Montana and such, too.
Yeah, okay. Oh. Hey, it's publicity, and there's nothing better than getting a bunch of other people putting the name out there. Like I saw a post on Facebook from a mutual real-life friend of ours talking about how she was about to read it, and she asked all of her Facebook friends, "Are you going to be next?" kind of a thing, and that was really cool. You can't buy that kind of publicity. And that's much true. Like we're seeing with our podcast, now that we've got it out at a couple more places and we've consistently put out content, we're starting to see increase in viewership, or I suppose listenership, maybe.
Listenership, yeah.
That we haven't directly influenced.
Nice.
We're now changing hands from other people, which is really cool, and it's going to keep building from that. So that's nice.
That's true. That's the thing. Like it starts off with friends and family, but then it's like friends of friends, and then it's like friends of friends of friends. Until finally, it's like there's so many like steps you have to take. It's like it gets bigger and bigger.
And then you get people who become your friends just because they listen to your podcast and they think they know you. Fun tangent that has little to do with the podcast, but just news personalities in general. So, like, sports anchors, for example, like ESPN's talents and stuff. It's really unfortunate. People watch that channel for a lot of sports content, and there's nothing wrong with that, and obviously. Right. But when people start to assume that because they see these talents on TV, they know everything about the person, so they go up and like, "Hey buddy," as if they go way back to say college days, and this person has no idea who they are from Adam, kind of a thing.
That's true.
When you get to that point, you're pretty big. But
I'm not quite there yet.
We're getting to the point though that eventually we might start getting some people to start following his work because of the podcast, as opposed to coming to the podcast through the book they bought or whatever. Or
the other way around, it could help each other. Like we could they would build off of each other, so that'd be cool.
Anyway,
side story, I was thinking of I got really excited at first when I was working at my coffee shop, right, and then I was working at the drive-thru. And someone came in, and then they ordered, and then I said anything else, and they're like, maybe a copy of Megazoic? I hear the sequel's coming out. I'm like, oh, this guy's a fan. It turned out to be just my brother-in-law. But I was pretty excited. I didn't recognize him at all. I was really excited, though. All right, what have you written?
Okay, well, I'm going to start with that thing that you got me thinking about. First, it's not traditional. A little while back, I was asked by one of my orchestra friends, acquaintances, I suppose, to help her look over a manuscript that she was doing for this book that she was writing about the power of music in her career as a physician, as she's a doctor by trade. And so she was talking about the story of this care facility starting to incorporate music into their recovery and start to make it more of a regular program, and just the power that music has on people whose lives are, in pretty bad shape in some cases. And so she originally wrote it in her native language, Japanese, but she speaks English very well, and she is crafting a new relationship with this guy who doesn't speak Japanese, and so she tried translating it to English herself. And she wanted somebody to look over the English, and out of the orchestra, no one else besides me would really fit that bill. So she asked me to take a look over it, and I did. And she wants to give me a financial compensation for doing the work.
Nice. Good job.
And so, I was driving to rehearsal last night. Yeah, there's that recently. I was driving to rehearsal last night and thinking, oh, crap, I still haven't told her what number I want to get paid, because I didn't think much of it. This is a couple months ago that I actually gave her the manuscript back with my marks in it and whatnot, and I just thought it would be done and over with, right? Just a favor kind of a thing. But then she said she wanted to pay me, and that in itself isn't necessarily a problem, but I've never done something like this before for payment. Obviously, Donald can attest that I do a lot of this stuff for free for him, and admittedly, I'm not the final say, but it's still
right. But I still very much appreciate your feedback.
Well, thank you. And so it's one of those things that, how much do I value the time I spent doing it? And in this case, I didn't even mind. I did it in like spare moments, and I got the thing done in less than a week. It did not take me very long because it wasn't a terribly lengthy book, and it was a really, really intriguing read for me. I did not see the original Japanese language. Full disclaimer, I only read the English translation. But the stories still have the same power. It's one of those things why it reminds me, one of the things I love about music so much, and that it affects people so profoundly. Different ways.
Right.
But that was, I enjoyed doing it because it reminded me of those feelings. I didn't need to get paid for it. I was thinking about what the number should be, and I actually solicited Donald for some suggestion, because obviously he's been through the editing process for an official basis to publish both of these two books. And so using his advice, I scaled a certain number, and when I saw the number related to yen, because I converted everything back, and I saw the number, and it just didn't feel right. It felt like it was too high. Like, I almost felt guilty asking for that amount of money.
Right.
Because, I was doing this as a favor. I didn't need to get paid, and yet here it is, and wow, that's a lot of money. And she said the money isn't really the object.
Did you, cut it by, half, or...?
Would you let me finish my story, please?
Oh, sorry. I'm really excited. I'm in such suspense. Finish it!
Anyways. So, I had this number, and I was like, well, I don't feel right asking her for that. She said money's no object, but, that's pretty extreme.
If money's truly no object.
I mean, we're talking, in yen, we're talking 6 figures.
Nice.
That's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. Yeah. No matter whether you convert it to dollars, that's still a lot of money. I don't remember what Donald paid to get his edited. Don't answer that. I think it was still more valuable than the one he did, but his book was longer. So how that worked out, I don't even understand.
I do the calculations.
Don't worry about it.
It's 3.5. It's 3.5 zillion dollars.
No. No. It may be 3.5 zillion yen would be like $1 billion, but no.
3.5 zillion protopets, right? That's what I was referencing. Come on.
Okay, no, I didn't actually catch that reference. Darn. Anyway, Ratchet and Clank listeners, in case you aren't familiar with it.
I know my audience, but apparently I don't know my audience because my audience didn't get it.
Well, come on. It's been so long since I played that game. Anyways,
finish your damn story.
It would help if you stop interrupting me.
Okay, fine.
So I looked at the number, and it just didn't mesh in my head with what I wanted. But as I was driving to rehearsal last night, and I just thought about it, I set a bar lower than that. Not the full value. I don't care. I don't need money anyway, so why worry about going to that full amount, right? But at the same time, I believe that my time, my efforts is valuable. I've gotten to a point where I'm comfortable with that idea. And so, I should still get something for it. And you know what? Why not lead with the offer? And if she says I can't afford that, then sure, you can adjust it down for all I care. It doesn't matter. But rather than devalue myself so much before she says anything, just go with it. The whole reason I'm telling this story is because you were talking about what you wanted to do with the Western States thing. Like, you deserve to get some cut of the profit. Yes. Don't devalue the time and effort it took to produce Megazoic.
Right. Well, thanks. I'm not planning on it with this instance, for what's worth. So, for your story, though, like, one thing I wanted to say, that's like the typical, like, whatever the term is, you always ask for more than you actually want, and then they're like, well, that's ridiculous, exactly. And you lower it, and then you end up getting a lot anyways. That's just the standard etiquette.
You highball.
Standard trick, I guess.
They probably lowball. And eventually both of you want something that's closer to the middle, and you negotiate it. It's not that hard.
But if you highball it enough, the lowballing ends up being closer to what you actually wanted. That's the trick.
Well, I mean, you don't want to highball too far because then you'll just get laughed out of the room. Kind of in negotiations. That's kind of a delicate balance.
Realize how important you are in their mission or whatever it is they want from you.
Right.
If it's really important, then you can probably afford to highball it way higher, and then. Yeah.
And here's the other thing too, like the money I'm asking about, because if she is willing to give me that money or whatever money she gives me, I'm just going to take it to the bank. I'm going to pay off my student loans with it.
That's true. Who knows?
It's not money that I was expecting to get anyway, so don't look a gift horse in the mouth.
Exactly not. Hey, that's a mean thing to say to this girl. She's not a horse.
No, I'm not suggesting that this woman is a horse.
How dare you, David?
Anyways.
What are you going to writ? Yeah.
As far as what I've actually written, it's been pretty hard. We did the Witties, and I talked about all this progress on the Shattered Creek story, and I finished that, and since then I just kind of hit a dry spell. Like, it happens. It's unfortunate. It's one of those
That's exactly
things,
what happens to me every time. Like,
it's one of those
whenever I finish a draft, I just stop afterwards. I'm like, oh, I need a break. So
you
I
just need a break, and I keep making decisions about how to spend my time that don't include writing, and so it's really hard. Like, you get this fine idea and you don't have the time, or you get the time and you suddenly don't have the ideas worth putting down, and it's really hard for me because, like, I really like the idea of writing, but I also have other things that I'm trying to balance in my life, and the violin won't practice itself. Time is a zero-sum game. All the time that I'm writing, I can't practice other instruments. All the time I'm practicing or watching Daredevil on Netflix,
You've always said you wanted to clone yourself so you could do all the things you wanted to at once, right?
Exactly. I mean, aside from, like, say, minor tweaks on editing things, I'll go back and fix things like that if I occasionally read through my old stuff. Some random scenarios that I play out in my head that I don't actually write down. I've had a couple of extra ideas for episodes on other projects, but other than that, I haven't actually produced much. Right now in particular, it's hard to swallow because I've got two different people waiting on two different projects, and that's not their fault. That falls on me because I'm just not making enough progress. However, as much as I'm talking about this dry spell, I did manage basically a full episode of Pulsar. I think I talked about it a while back. It was one of my newer Ranger fanfics. I believe so. And I did some more. I haven't finished the part yet, but I did some more on what I keep calling the tag story. Former roommate of mine and I created alter ego superhero type characters with different names, of course. And we just add on to each other's story. So it's my turn, and he's waiting on that from me now because I haven't done it yet. I haven't sent it to him, and I kind of feel bad about that. But, I need to make decisions to, make writing a priority. If only I didn't have so much music to practice. If only I didn't have to go to work so many hours of the day. If only, And at some point it becomes excuses rather than reasons, and I understand that. But right now I'm in a dry spell. I need to work myself out of it. So, listeners, send support.
Send all the supports and all the flowers, chocolates.
Send an email. Hey, get off your lazy butt and write, dang it. You're a co-host on a writing podcast, not a music podcast, idiot. All those kind of, fun, encouraging, flower, happy, rainbows notes.
I mean, it's all creative stuff, right? Like, sometimes I'm really, really loose on what counts as what we, the Wits, have writ. No joke, at one point I was, like, playing with Legos. I had this Lego dinosaur that I was building, and I was going to give it guns, and at one point I was actually thinking about putting that in there. That does not count, but I was like, why not?
Well, I mean, if you're just talking about creative, I suppose the art of trying to perfect music is creative in its own way because you have to take a journey, but like that doesn't excuse the fact that as far as written words, I haven't really produced much.
To be fair, writ is not a real word, so maybe we could define writ as performing any creative arts, you know?
Ooh! Then that time I did an interpretive dance for my colleagues.
Yeah, that was a real writ, that dance of yours.
You didn't see it, you don't know.
That was a real good piece of writ work. Hey, you know what can help you get out of your funk of your writing spell? Your dry spell?
Those Writ sponsored cerebral stimulation beans.
That and writing a sequel.
Well, I did say I mentioned last time that I was going to start on a sequel for Shattered Creek. And, you know, because we've had this idea rolling around in our heads for a while, and obviously it's relevant because, you know, Donald over there just published one.
Wait, what did I publish?
I don't know what he published. Oh, let me see. It was this series about dinosaurs with laser guns and using the same characters and a story
Dinosaurs
that
with laser guns?
came.
That sounds dumb. What kind of idiot would write a story like that?
But it came after the first one. This is not the first one. This is farther than that. This is what we call
man, that's so dumb. Why would a story so dumb get a sequel? Like, wow, there's no class left in the world. Like, there's just nothing. There's no point of anything anymore. What's the point if we have this story that gets a sequel? Like, oh my god. Oh wait, it's my work. Okay, fine. We're talking about sequels.
Wow, that was the most awkward segue I think we've ever had. Anyway, so yeah,
it was so prolonged too.
Yeah, it was really long. Sorry. Anyway,
we were just dragging that horse and beating it until it's dead, and then it's undead, and then it's dead again.
All right, well, here we go. We're talking about sequels. So here's the first thing about sequels. You have to have the first story, right? It wouldn't be a sequel if you didn't have the original.
No.
But this brings up a question. What reasons are there for writing a sequel? Why write a sequel?
Yeah, like what's the benefit of it versus like other, like, I don't know, like a new idea or like something like that. Like what can a sequel provide? Basically,
what can a sequel accomplish as opposed to, you know, changing trains to a different story idea and running with it?
Right, exactly. Basically, in my opinion, like one of the good things about sequels, you can expand the arcs of your characters and have them go through like further situations that like further develop them. And like also if it's like fantasy or sci-fi, you can expand the world you've created, like showing the reader sides of it they might not have seen before. And plus, from a writer's perspective, it's easier launching off point for yourself. And also from a reader's perspective, you get more guaranteed readers of it. Because if people like your first work, they're more likely to read a sequel to that work rather than just a brand new story of yours that you'll work. Unfortunately, the thing is people lately are more keen on latching themselves onto properties rather than creators right now. True. It's just how it works.
You see that a lot in comic books as well.
Right.
You get a creator that goes to a character. I'm going to use an example of the prominent comic book author Brian Michael Bendis.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, he's finishing up his work at Marvel. He's been exclusive with Marvel Comics for many years, and he made a lot of headway on Spider-Man, introducing Miles Morales and a bunch of other things in the Spider-Man universe. And then he has gone to other main characters. And people are finally coming around to the fact that, you know, maybe they should follow the writer rather than, Spider-Man. Right. He gets treated 7 different ways by 7 different authors.
Exactly. Well, also, like, J.K. Rowling, when she was done with Harry Potter, she published that one, the murder mystery one. I haven't really heard anything about it since. I think there might be a series. I think there's more of them, but, like, it's not nearly as big. I mean, it wasn't to be expected to be as big, but it's just...
Well, we didn't expect Harry Potter to be that big when she first started, right?
Right, but, like, Harry Potter eventually was so big that it would be impossible to follow up on. But, like, and she couldn't. But then when Harry Potter and the Cursed Child came out, that was... Maybe I'm just hanging out with more of the circles that would do that, but that was a much bigger deal. So that's kind of the point we're making here.
Yep.
I'm not trying to say people shouldn't come up with original ideas. Of course you should.
I'm thinking what you're getting at is that the people will follow the brand because they like the story, not necessarily because they like the creator of it as much. So it's not they're following the creator's work.
Right, well that's one of the benefits of writing a sequel.
They're not following the creator so much as they're following the work of that creator.
Or at least they're more likely to follow the creation rather than the creator, you know? Like
And to be fair, I mean, if we're talking about something like Megazoic, which we have in the past. Obviously, it's a little different than following, Star Wars. The extended universe, for example.
Maybe someday. No, never. Never. It will never get that big.
But, I mean, that's the thing, though, is that, like, with comic book properties, with things that get so sprawling that multiple authors get a chance to work on it at any one time.
Right.
That's when following the creator is a more rewarding option. As opposed to, oh, hey, look at this comic that stars Jean-Luc Picard, and they treated like he seems to change character because there's a different writer on it, but I'm going to follow it anyway, rather than, I really like that writing, so why don't I follow that writer?
Right, exactly. Well, I don't know. That's what I think one of the benefits is. Anyways, what about you?
Going back to the characters thing, I think by giving them more space to breathe naturally within the arc that you have for them, you can make that journey more fulfilling to craft.
Right.
You can enjoy watching them develop, and so ostensibly does the reader.
Absolutely.
I mentioned during edits of the Primeval Power, my past before he published it, obviously.
Okay.
I mentioned that there's a thing with one of his characters, Bellar.
Yes.
And, please read the book. So hopefully, no, I'm not going to try spoiling anything, but if you don't know what character that is, read the book.
Right.
Anyway, Bellar, there's a progression of how Bellar reacts to the world and how it changes by the people he meets and how that impacts his life.
Right.
And now that there's more space to see that change, it's better for the reader to take that journey, as opposed to,
if he just been his first
does
book.
It happen too fast or it doesn't happen at all?
Right. That's just one example as well. Like Cortan, like he as well has gone through, like not just so much in terms of like character progression, but also like he's much more like comfortable in combat as well.
Sure.
Like even if he's not so much the one fighting it, but he's more relaxed in it. Of course, he's still tense, but like he's more focused, I guess. I don't know. It's just basically ways to help.
Can I spoil what he does near the beginning of the Primeval Power?
Sure, go.
That has literally no difference to the plot.
Sure, fine.
He takes weapons training.
Yes, he does take weapons training. I mean, unwittingly, but he does it. I had fun with that scene, though. Like, there's a lot of good stuff.
Yep.
Anyways,
well, I'd hope you like all of it, but
I did, but like I had a lot of fun with that one.
Anyway, done correctly, a sequel can empower the author.
Right.
If you're doing a direct follow-up to something that you've already created, it validates what you're doing. It empowers you to go further, to move beyond, to expand the world, the characters within it, right?
Right.
Saying that, the biggest motivations for a sequel, you have a story that you must tell, that you just feel compelled to tell people, that won't fit in the scope of the original.
Right.
Or maybe you want to use those familiar characters and setting and branch out the story a little bit.
Right.
Kind of like an older version of Megazoic that you did where you went to other planets.
Right. That was fun.
It was, because you got to craft that universe.
It did. And even though, like I said earlier, it didn't fit, it allowed me to create a bunch of cool ideas that I'm totally using for other things. So I'm glad I did that.
Some point or other. But I have to add the caveat. Doing it just because, quote unquote, or for some financial expectation is not a good reason to write a sequel.
Right. It shouldn't be the sole reason.
Not at all.
Like, obviously, if, like, you're bigger and, like, to the point where someone has to tell you, okay, your book was really big, we want a sequel in 6 months, and it's in contract, whatever, you can still make it work as a good sequel.
But then you're writing because somebody else told you to, not necessarily because you decided to do it.
Right.
Like, that's my take.
Right. I'm just saying, don't feel like it's lost by that point. Like, any writer can work to make something good.
Absolutely. And, it's one of those things, doing it just because I feel like I need to do it. Is it because you really need a sequel, or is it because you don't want to let go of that character? Going back to J.K. Rowling for a bit.
Right, well...
ever since Harry Potter has been over and basically out of her hands, there have been other people starting to caretake it. And so every so often she'll chime in on Twitter with things that are changing or new. And I don't mean to suggest that J.K. Rowling is incapable of creating anything else successful, but it seems that she won't let go of the success that Harry Potter has had. And every time that somebody says something, she comes to straighten the record out. She comes to, change something, mention something that she had in mind that she didn't put in the books beforehand. And so it's almost like retroactive at this point.
And also she's writing those new movies. Like, those are screenplays written by her of the Fantastic Beasts movies. So
Right. But all of the time she's spending on screenplays, she can't write other stories that could, even approximate the success of a single book.
To be fair,
in Harry Potter series.
How could you follow something like Harry Potter?
I don't know.
Like, that is a phenomenon.
Right. It was a cultural phenomenon. And great for her to create it.
I don't know if it can ever... Like, George Lucas, when creating the Star Wars prequels, knew exactly what he was getting into. How could you follow Star Wars? And that's one of the reasons why a lot of people really didn't like it. And he knew that that would probably happen. Because how do you do that? Yeah?
Hold on. You're referring to prequels. We're talking about sequels.
Right, I'm just saying that's the same sort of thing. Right. Oh, you're making a joke. Good one.
Well, I mean, prequels obviously are created after the original story too, but the setting is before, and that's a completely different thing.
Hey,
we'll talk about
segue. What other type of sequels are there? I mean, we'll get to prequels.
Maybe. Who knows?
Who knows?
Unless you want to start there, since you so heavy-handedly made a segue.
No, we can't start with a prequel. It's not a prequel, remember? It's just the first installment.
Well, the setting is before the other types of sequels, so maybe it is. And it came after our original germ, right?
Sure, but we're not doing it that way. Alright, first up, we got, this is probably the most common one, standalone follow-ups, just standalone works. So, like, examples, Indiana Jones, like, all those movies are pretty standalone, and they're just basically more adventures. All the James Bond movies, with the exception of Quantum of Solace, which directly follows Casino Royale.
Considering those are the two I really haven't seen, that shouldn't make sense. I also haven't seen, what was the last one? Titanfall, I think?
No, that was a video game. Spectre is the last one.
Spectre.
Skyfall. There was one before it was Skyfall.
I knew it had something fall in it.
Right, yeah. But that also wasn't the last one. That was the second last one.
Fine.
But
yeah, I haven't seen like any of the Daniel Craig ones, honestly.
that's fine. But like, Spectre and Skyfall are more of like the standalone follow-ups to standalone works. They're more interlocked than other James Bond movies, but
right.
It's still like...
But these two in particular are literally back-to-back in story.
Okay, so there's like that. There's like Godfather Part 2, of course. I've never seen it, but that's... Fun fact, that's the first movie with 2 in the title. To denote that it's a Part 2.
Before Back to the Future did.
Godfather Part 2.
Okay, fair enough.
Well, it was in the early 70s, so...
Yeah.
Huckleberry Finn and Tom Sawyer is another one. That's actually like a sort of... Like, Huckleberry Finn is like a completely different story than Tom Sawyer. Like, Huckleberry Finn is like a more serious novel.
I would almost qualify that as spin-off, honestly.
Yeah, I guess it...
Like, it takes a character who appears in Tom Sawyer and then it makes him the big deal in a different story.
I just put this in here because I wanted a book. I don't read. What's this reading? I'm very illiterate. As a writer, I probably should get on to learning how to read.
Well, you know what I've said about that.
That's true.
All right, so what we're going to do is talk about different kinds of sequels and then kind of do, quick benefits, detriments to each. So, go ahead.
Right, yeah. For standalone follow-ups to standalone works, the benefits, I think, are like you can create new conflicts for the same characters, right? And introduce new plot threads without feeling forced. Like, if you're like... Oh, this is a new threat. Oh, we have to go stop it. It's less forced if it's this kind of sequel versus...
If it's a standalone thing, then they obviously need some origin anyway, which doesn't relate to what already came
right.
before.
And also, provided there's no ultimate resolution, you could make these forever. So,
yep.
That's another fun thing about it.
Also, one thing that I thought about, too, as far as a benefit to this, your narrative... doesn't have to be forced into the same style. If you want to alter it, you can make that choice.
Right. Well, that's why.
Like if you want to add say a horror element to a story that was originally sci-fi, that's your call.
Right. Like as long as they all kind of like the same sort of like tone overall to them, but even again, maybe not.
Well, it doesn't even have to be that. It's like a standalone story. It's basically an experiment. Right, it either works or it doesn't. But because it's a separate story, it doesn't have to be 100% carbon copy of the original, is what I'm saying.
Absolutely not. It allows you to try new things, yeah. And if people don't like it, hey, it's okay, because next one, we'll go back to what you like.
It's a standalone story. It won't affect... I mean, hopefully, if you have characters in common, like, they still manage to grow, and if they're, further put off into spin-offs, that they don't completely, keep reverting. Now for some detriments to this particular style. You run the risk of having your audience wonder if a sequel is really necessary.
Well, of course.
Like, come on. If you told such a good story, are you just inventing a new conflict in a new genre just so you can write the same characters again?
Right. Like, it's these are usually the ones that are likely to be bad decisions. Like,
yep. You also risk prohibiting growth for the characters.
Right.
Because, if you have to put them in a different style of story, it's not going to be the same progression as you had in the original, theoretically. Or the story as a whole, even.
Or conversely, if they all have to stand alone from each other, then you can't really have an ongoing arc.
Yep.
Like, in terms of, character, I mean.
That's true.
Here.
You can't have a running plot. Or a subplot, for example.
Right. Or, a way that character... I mean, I guess you could, but it's more difficult. Like, you don't want to make it...
And compared to other sequels, I think that these are far simpler to screw up, quote-unquote. Because, your world changes. It's a standalone story. It's not supposed to have much intrinsic connection. Thus, you have to change things. to make it viable. And so it's easier to make choices that you might enjoy, but the readers, the audience that you have coming back might not enjoy so much.
Well, like, so an example of that would be like the last Indiana Jones movie. For Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, there were aliens in that, right? And a lot of people were like, why? No! And, there's another one coming out because part of Harrison Ford's contract for doing Force Awakens was he likes more Indiana Jones than Han Solo as a role. So one of the things, like, I want to do one more of those as well. So he's going to do that.
If you're going to make me do this, then I'm going to do one more of that.
Right, exactly. So, and whenever they do that, they're just going to probably completely ignore that. And they can, which is a benefit to this kind of thing. They were like, okay, for this one we'll do aliens, we'll see what people think. And people did not like it.
What was the movie? Cowboys and Aliens? I mean, I realize Indiana Jones is not a cowboy.
But Harrison Ford was in that, so...
Anyways, the next kind of sequel we're talking about, multi-part follow-ups to standalone works.
Right, like
so, for example, like Back to the Future.
Right.
Or the Matrix trilogy. Mm-hmm. The first 2 Pirates of the Caribbean sequels.
So not like any of the ones after that. Like those are
because
all,
once you get through,
one.
I think the third one was at World's End, or is that the fourth?
That's the third one.
That's the third one. The fourth and fifth were separate because they brought in new characters as opposed to Will Turner.
They're standalone follow-ups, yes.
Right, the latter 2 installments of the original Star Wars trilogy, also, of course, and the whole of the Lord of the Rings books to the Hobbit book.
Right, because like the Hobbit was a standalone story, but then Tolkien wanted to grow it, and he created Lord of the Rings. But then it was more retroactively he connected the Hobbit to his Middle Earth world that he created in his head. So it's again, I wanted to put this because I needed a book.
I've actually read both of them, and I honestly thought that Hobbit was written after Lord of the Rings, but I didn't.
No. It was written before. It was written in the 30s, while Lord of the Rings was written in like the 50s.
Not true. I looked it up. What happened is that the Hobbit came out, and that same year he started work on Lord of the Rings. But he did it in installments, so the final product wasn't released until like the late 40s.
Right, that makes sense. I mean, I feel like that makes sense. That he wouldn't wait 20 years to write.
But I seem to remember, I seem to remember thinking that when I learned about it and read them, that Lord of the Rings was like fully formed before he did the Hobbit. And
no, Hobbit came first.
But I realized after looking it up that that's wrong.
Right, yeah. Well, also, to be fair, he did release a second edition, maybe after Lord of the Rings, where the Hobbit made it more fitting with the Lord of the Rings world, because he originally wrote that as a story that was actually not connected. And then as he was writing Lord of the Rings, maybe we should connect this, or maybe we could keep Hobbit to that same world. Yep. So I don't know.
Anyways,
so benefits and detriments of this.
You can greatly expand your world. You can increase the scale of your story tenfold, if not more than that. The Fantasy Megazoic, for example, you introduced how many new planets that you basically didn't use?
First one was just basically on one planet. Then after that, I get pretty nuts.
Yeah, you get very nuts. Anyway, the characters, they have dramatic arcs. They can become more dynamic. And, who knows, maybe your sequel introduces other fan favorites, and they'll continue on because you're exploring this new adventure, this new status quo, and they become the great character. Note, polar opposite of Jar Jar Binks.
Let's see. I'm trying to think of an example. Like Davy Jones in the Pirates of the Caribbean sequels. He was introduced for them.
Yep.
And
a lot of people really liked Davy Jones.
Right. Yeah. So.
I mean, you never know. Like the original characters, great, fine, fantastic. But then you can also add new ones that weren't in your original story.
Absolutely. Well, that's true of any sequel, but this kind of sequel makes it since you spend more time with them.
Particularly in a connected universe.
Right.
Anyway, detriments, go for it.
You have multiple follow-ups. These follow-ups, the problem is they're often more connected with each other than the original. That's it makes it seem okay, so
makes you wonder, do people plan sequels immediately, or do they plan it this seems like it's going to be really good, and after seeing the reception yeah, it's really good, let's make sequels.
I think,
and so then they kind of plan them together.
That's usually what happens with this, yeah. So in the process, you could potentially nullify or even not even realize what made the original so good in the first place.
Sure.
Last few Pirates of the Caribbean sequels keep coming out. A lot of people seem to think that they realize in retrospect the first one was probably good on accident because they cannot seem to replicate it. I like all of them, but I get why people think that. The first one's definitely more solid.
They sure keep trying
than
though.
The other ones, definitely a solid structure.
With multi-part outings, you kind of widen the scope, but with the characters that you focused on, that scope might be a bit too broad.
Right, exactly.
All of a sudden throwing Cortan out into space and sending him to a planet that's not in his version of Megazoic, but the other one, wouldn't make sense.
Imagine the meetings that he would have.
Anyway, but that scope's a little too broad for that character, and so you either have to introduce a corollary character or a frame of reference character, that kind of a thing.
Or, like, you basically, like, decreasing the scope too much. You have to justify why this is a two-parter and trying to make it seem more epic. You might forget the first one was actually kind of a simpler, smaller-scale story. So,
True.
First one, we're doing this thing, we're saving this one place, and then we're stopping this one guy. Come the second one, the entire universe is at stake, and there's so many characters who need to come together to fight the greater evil.
Of Thanos, because that's happening very soon. Anyway.
That's actually, they planned that.
I know, I'm joking. Although, if you want to talk about that, though, I mean, almost all those different movies have certain focus of their own that's not the same. So, the scope is broad on purpose, but that's a different conversation, so let's not have
the Marvel Cinematic Universe is fascinating. It's kind of like all these things. Except for prequels, of course.
In many ways it is. Although...
except for Captain America, First Avengers. I
was about to say, and the one that's coming out soon, Captain Marvel, is supposedly resetting the timeline as well and going back to the 90s.
It's in the 80s, yeah. Or the 90s, yeah. That's right, yeah.
So, yeah, that is a prequel, by definition.
There you go. All right.
Anyway, obviously that hasn't come out yet. But anyways, you run the risk of altering the tone a bit too far.
Right.
Because, when you write the original, if it's a standalone thing, you have it set. It's already done. And then you decide to write a two-part follow-up to that, but you have to go somewhere new, and so, you make choices that aren't necessarily consistent with the story you had before.
Right.
And so that kind of... we mentioned it a little bit with standalone sequels. You can change it, but here if you do change it too much, the audience won't like it.
Because you have to deal with it for longer, because it's a multi-parter.
Well, that and the fact that because they're connected, they can't just skip that because they don't like it.
Right.
You can't pick and choose your favorites if you have to see 2 to understand 3.
Well, and also, it makes the reader feel more like, this is just how the series is now, rather than this was just a hiccup, and if it's something you don't like.
If it's the same author, it's far less excusable than if it's different authors, taking their turn, kind of a thing.
Right, absolutely.
Anyways,
that was that one. Next one, we got next chapter of a larger story. So we got the Harry Potter books, or movies, or really any of them. Lord of the Rings, just relative to each other. And also the Star Wars prequels. Those prequels, rather than the first one, Star Wars was written as its own movie, and then, later on, they added Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, and then they're Empire Strikes Back...
Well, even in the beginning, they had Episode 4, so it implies there must be...
They actually didn't, is the thing. They added that in later, and then...
the text crawl had Episode 4 on it.
The version that you have on VHS. I'm talking about the original theatrical version that you can find on YouTube. It just says Star Wars. It's not even A New Hope. Original was just called Star Wars.
True, but at the same time...
It really confused people when Empire Strikes Back came out, and then they said Episode 5, because that did say it at first. And some people who didn't get the memo were like, wait a minute, what happened to the 3 in between?
The other... Yeah.
What happened to Episodes 2, 3, and 4?
Yeah, the 3 in between. Right.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I almost didn't get that at first. I'm like, wouldn't it be the 3 Oh, wait.
Right, yeah. But yeah, anyways. So, the prequels, though, obviously, since we were starting with 1, they knew how to get to 4. They're much more interconnected as a trilogy. So. Even though
they managed to have big time skips in between them, right? So 1 to 2 was quite a few years.
Well, yeah.
As I recall. That's why they had.
It was 10,
that's why they got Hayden Christensen as opposed to the kid.
And then
because they needed somebody who was an adult now as opposed to somebody who would be an adult 10 years later.
Right. And then Revenge of the Sith was 3 years later, which is a little gap, but not as bad. I think it's about the gap. Yeah,
it's an important gap, but it's not a big one relative to 10
enough
years.
To fit the whole Star Wars: The Clone Wars TV show in between. So, anyways, benefits to this: you can create one large story, right?
Sure.
As opposed to smaller fragments. Rather than creating this epic scale later, like with the previous one we had, it just makes it from the beginning, makes it more consistent.
Yeah, if you started looking at the whole universe, not just the Milky Way, then all of a sudden, looking at the Milky Way for one, and then going to the others becomes it widens, right, enormously. But if it's just you have a chapter that happens concurrently in a completely different nebula, and then you focus on something in the Milky Way, it's already big to begin with.
This metaphor is getting really muddled here, but okay, go on.
I don't know. Anyways.
I like what you're doing, though. It's kind of funny.
What?
Keep going. Keep going with your space stuff.
I'm sorry. I'm not hard... You're hardly hard sci-fi. Don't laugh at me.
No, I'm not hard sci-fi at all. I like lasers. Pew, pew.
Well,
For more information on hard sci-fi, listen to episode 15. Hour into our cheap plug. That's actually our record, I think. I think the last one was 40 minutes. Alright, anyways. What else is good about this kind of
Well, you can continue to cherish your creations. You challenge them, and you make them grow, along with you as the writer. If it's a larger story, then that same character has to fill a larger story, then they have to become, pardon the term, a larger character.
Right. Of course.
Plenty of space to indulge. Because you have such a large story, you have plenty of space to indulge those minor dalliances with subplots that, hey, you pay that off later. It's really cool. Yet still, hopefully, have the time to actually include the payoff. Right. Obviously, this depends on when you stop.
Right.
If you decide, I'm going to introduce something in book 2, and then never write book 4 where the resolution of that happens, well, that's on you. But
or by the time you get to book 4, you forget.
That's also true. The world is your oyster. The only bound of that is your imagination. If it's a large-scale story that you're creating all yourself. Right,
but conversely, it can be exhausting, to write, and, you could forget in book 4 to do the thing you set up in book 2.
Right.
And also as a reader, some people get really into that, but you never know. Someone might be like, okay, wait, this guy did what now? And then how is he connected to this guy?
For all of these people who buy the intense, encyclopedia for Song of Fire and Ice, there are plenty of people who have never even heard of that encyclopedia exists and frankly don't want to spend the hours tracking
See,
everything.
I had heard of that for a long time, and it wasn't until, only a couple of years ago that I'm like, wait a minute, that's what Game of Thrones was based off on. I didn't actually know. I didn't put 2 and 2 together. I'm such an idiot. To be fair, I never watched Game of Thrones. I just heard it was popular. So
something about pretending to know things about pop culture. Anyway.
Oh, that's right, I'm pretending. I knew that from the beginning. I don't know what you're talking about. Why are you spreading these rumors, David?
I'm not spreading anything. It wasn't my words, it was yours. Anyway.
That's right, you're not spreading anything.
What other detriments are there to, this large scale story just from the start kind of thing?
Well, basically, that means that, whenever you get to that ending point, which should hopefully be, a big ending, a conclusive, very real ending, that's it. It's over. You're done. Any follow-ups are redundant. I guess you could do, another series, but you'd really have to justify why. It can't just be another sequel, is what I'm saying. But this could be a benefit for certain writers, me. Me. Just so you know, I had a big, extravagant plan for Wild After Tomorrow 3, and damn it, you took it away from me. No, it's fine. I'm really glad you did.
We've still never explained that, did we?
At this point, it's funnier if we don't. Honestly, we just make it a running joke that we just never pay off with.
We were going to do it on the What We Have Once Writ, but then we got screwed by computer
problems. And then we'll have that Patreon exclusive, maybe, on what else we the Writ have writ.
Okay, anyway.
Well, basically, yeah.
Sorry. This is the most unintentionally... It is the most unintentional but hilarious running joke I think we've ever had.
The best running jokes are the ones that are intentional, I think. They're not forced at all. Alright.
Anyway. What's to say the original story needed a sequel?
Right.
Just having a hook doesn't mean it's a great idea.
Right, of course.
Donald.
So many plans.
Your tale begins to get hemmed into a certain genre by followers, whether you intend that or not. No matter what other paths you try to take within this story, no matter what other things you do with this large-scale work, people always kind of, describe it, put it into a square hole, whether it's a round peg or not.
Right, of course.
And so, if you want to escape that, here's the brilliant answer. Maybe you don't need a sequel in that instance. But, sequels aren't inherently bad. Obviously, you can do a lot of things.
We're doing a whole episode about them. So.
And obviously they're important because Donald over there published one recently. And congratulations again.
Thank you.
But seriously, it's one of those things that sequels are very intriguing because you can go further. But what happens when you go back?
Nice! Good segue, I'm very impressed. Good. You're so seamless, and I'm ruining it, I know, but I know how I feel. That's whenever you do that. Okay, so prequels. This is what the next one. The final one we got, there's probably way more than this, the spin-off or what.
Well, maybe we should mention the spin-offs and as a throw-in.
Spiritual sequels, I don't know, it's just...
Direct-to-videos. Direct-to-video.
Sure. The cheat quoll is what that's called.
The threequel we haven't done, anyway.
That's part of a next chapter of a larger story, or it could be any of them. I don't know.
Well, so could spin-offs.
Fine. We'll include all those in our next Patreon exclusive, other sequels and spin-offs and other crap.
Oh,
exact title.
No. We don't need another episode for that. It's a spin-off. You take a character and you do something different with him. It probably isn't the same lead, but that's the whole point.
Great example, Cars 2, Mater.
Done.
Everyone loves that guy. That's one of Pixar's most beloved sequels, I'd say.
Well, I'd say Toy Story 2 when you added Jessie, but that's not really a spin-off, is it?
Yeah, I'm also being heavily sarcastic.
I know.
You know what's a good sequel?
Anyway.
Is Monsters University, which happens to be a prequel. I brought it back.
You're just trying...
I like that one. I don't know why people don't like that one as much. I like Monsters University. Anyways, other examples are the Star Wars prequels. Duh.
It's right in the name, right?
The Magician's Nephew in terms of publication for the Narnia series.
Right.
Like,
I think he wrote Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, Prince Caspian, and Voyage of the Dawn Treader, and maybe even Horse and His Boy before doing Magician's Nephew. If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, exactly.
But in, like, chronological order, of course, Magician's Nephew comes first because it introduces the then young Professor Diggory Kirk.
Right.
So.
And then the creation of Narnia, so... but then also the Hobbit movies, not the book, because as we've figured out, it came first. But the movies came later.
So what benefits are there to doing prequels, Donald?
Benefits! Yes. You can show a different side to your story's universe, and, like, expand upon the backstories of characters. You can also retroactively add greater meaning to events of the original through events of the prequel. Like, for example, in Monsters University, there's a scene where, like, Randy, what was his name? Randall Boggs.
Yeah.
He's like a weird lizard guy, the first one, who's like a chameleon sort of thing. He ends up being Mike Wazowski's roommate in college. Later on, he gets roomed up with Solomon, but not Solomon, Sullivan.
Sully.
Sully. But at first, it's Randy, and then he and Randy become good friends. And then, like, some certain events happen and start making them turn worse, right? The real kicker, though, is in this final scare competition, Sully just utterly humiliates Randy in front of everyone. And, like, then he's like, that's the last time I lose to you, Sullivan. And then you're like, oh, a rivalry is born.
There you go. I mean, if you have that reference, you can then add little, like, Easter egg gestures that, reward the readers. They're very rewarding for faithful readers.
Yeah.
Because they tend to dovetail very nicely to the original story that fans are familiar with. It's kind of like how... when you find out that...
Yes.
When you find out that Darth Vader is Luke's father, that... his name must be Skywalker, theoretically, so you meet Anakin. Oh, look at that!
Well, look at that indeed. To be fair, he calls him Anakin in Return of the Jedi, I believe.
Well, anyway. Point being, you're finally seeing a face to put with the name that when he was young.
Right. Other than the weird, gross one that he took when he took the mask off of
him.
Like a human
As
face.
I said, when he was young. Anyhow.
Exactly. All right. One more thing about, like, add greater meaning to events of the original. In The Hobbit, Gandalf says to Bilbo that, like, sometimes the most heroic thing is know when to not take a life, but when to spare one. And at one point, this is in the books as well, Bilbo is running away. He's got the one ring on. He stole it from Gollum, and he's trying to hide from Gollum, and Gollum is, like, trying to kill him, of course. But then, like, he's about to kill Gollum because he's alone.
Yep.
And, like, he's got his sword, and Gollum is, like, there, and he can't see him, of course, he's got the ring. But then he sees just how sad Gollum looks. Like, he just looks, like, so pitiful. And he's like, I lost the precious. I'm not good with my Gollum voice, so I'm not even going to try. So I tried there, and then I'm like, that's a bad idea.
I'm not going to try it either.
So he decides, I'm not going to kill him. And then he leaves. That inadvertently saved all of Middle-earth. Because, if you recall, Gollum fighting with Frodo with the one ring, they tumble, and he falls into Mount Doom with the ring.
Ends up pushing Frodo into the lava.
That's what saved Middle-earth. That would not have happened if it was just Frodo and Sam there. One, they would have ever gotten to Mount Doom. And even if they did, Frodo would have become too tempted.
Which destroys the ring.
Right, exactly. And then Frodo became too tempted by the one ring, and he wasn't going to throw it in. So it needed to be
I don't
forced
think that
in,
Sam would have... I don't think that Sam would have pushed Frodo into the lava.
Anyways, detriments, though.
They can often be considered unnecessary.
Right.
The original is kind of written without mind of a backstory, unless the writer does a lot of that planning ahead of time. Like the retroactive add of episode 4, which means that 1, 2, and 3 must come before it, right? But not all authors are so meticulous in
Right.
their planning. Not all of us can be J.R.R. Tolkien or maybe C.S. Lewis, to name another prominent, like, obviously we mentioned Magician's Nephew. You know, and it's one of those things that you can't really change the ending. The resolution is inevitable because all of the certain characters that are in the original are in that place by the original, which means that unless there's a humongous gap, and even then, you're still railroaded into an ending.
Right, exactly. Like, we all know where it's going to end up eventually, so what the
It's
stakes?
fascinating to watch Anakin's descent to
Right.
become Darth Vader, but we know from the second we see this tiny innocent child that he's going to become one of the most fearsome Sith Lords in that world, in that
Absolutely.
universe.
This is why, unlike a lot of other people, I never mind spoilers, because I even with like other things, like I've never minded spoilers. The reason why I don't really care about the what, I care about the why and the how. That's how I specify, and that's the benefit of prequels to other people as well.
True.
So that might be why other people don't really care for them as much, and I tend to like them.
I kind of like
again,
not knowing everything because I kind of appreciate the
Right.
feeling of seeing it for the first time in the house, and that way you get a
Right.
more honest reaction. That's why I don't like spoilers. But yes, I appreciate seeing the journey. You know the end result. I want to see how he got there, and that's one of the really good things about prequels. Sorry, we're talking detriments. I realize that, but you know,
no worries.
but because that resolution, it's set.
Exactly.
Unless you want to retcon something, but your original, theoretically, if your original is published
Right.
and you did something beforehand, you are powerless to change the original.
Absolutely.
You can't.
Unless you do a second edition, but then if you do that later, then that's not a prequel anymore.
Well, doing a second edition might change the entire story. Like, it's these ripples
Absolutely.
you cannot see. And this is one thing, like, I imagine if I ever write a prequel, it will be the hardest thing I ever do as a writer because
Right.
I tend to fly by the seat of my pants. The more I write, the more I
Absolutely.
find inspiration in something that I said, and I spin off somewhere else, and I make a decision, and that's why I like to write chronologically, even if I really don't want to write this episode and I have this great idea for later.
Yeah, I've always wanted to write chronologically as well, yeah.
But if I don't write it chronologically, then that means I have to work to the same point, and working that is not easy.
Absolutely not, yeah. So, yeah.
You're handcuffed to an end point because you can't alter the original if the original's already done.
Right.
But if you write that part of the story first, this one that you're trying to do, it's not a prequel. So
Exactly. It's a real cluster F, isn't it? Anyways. Oh,
it's a real conundrum.
real kerfuffle.
The kerfuffle of blah. For that
Anyways,
reference, please listen to...
episode 6 of the Writ. Okay, there we go. And I think about which one
No,
it was.
no, it wasn't. It wasn't. Which episode was it? I don't remember. Which
It was
number, but
6.
It was the one where we talked about one we talked about criticisms. Yeah.
It was 6.
Oh, it was, okay.
Trust me on this one.
All right. I'll trust you. Anyway,
Thank you. So those are sequels. Those are the type of sequels.
yeah. So those are different kinds of sequels, obviously spin-offs and whatnot. But I wanted to, give the listeners a little something more too. So what are the rules of a good sequel?
In my opinion, you further explore your characters, you have them grow, and you give your readers more what they liked from the first, while also balancing it with new and fresh content.
Fair enough.
What about you?
Personally, I think if you resist the temptation to go overboard, like a bad sequel gets too sprawling. It's too hard for the
Right.
writer. Gives readers more of a peek into the world or characters inhabiting it. Live in charge of the genre of your story. You want to add horror elements?
Right.
Why not? And make sure you're doing
not,
it
right?
for the story you want to tell rather than some other reason.
That is definitely a good rule. So
On the flip side of the coin, rules or what just in general makes a bad sequel.
I think it's either when you rehash the beats of the original point by point, or you drastically change everything to the point where you just remove everything people liked about the original. You need to find that balance, that Goldilocks style. Not this way, not that way, just right. The balance you have to strive to achieve.
Absolutely.
What about you?
I mean, especially if you extend the story
Yeah.
unnecessarily, it's just delaying the inevitable. The quality tends
Right.
to suffer too. I'm thinking of
Absolutely.
Wildlife of Tomorrow 3.
To be fair,
You know-
we never got there. Like, it could have been a masterpiece.
Anyway, restarting the characters from square one so new readers can jump on is counterproductive. If you had them grow in the books before, why undo that growth just to give them a story arc again? Like, find something different.
That is a common problem,
But
though,
find
unfortunately.
something different to do. Like, there's no reason you have to
Right.
rework the same character transition. Which means that if it is truly a sequel, if you're using the same character, then you should have the growth from the original intact. Otherwise, if you don't, it's a bad sequel is what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
Keeping the exact same roster of leads is an awful choice.
Right.
I'm sure we could rant about this a while longer because, strong opinions about sequels and whatnot. But here's my rule of thumb. Don't commit to the sequel until you're sure you want to wrap up the entire story arc.
Right. I mean,
if you think that you're going to have 3 sequels, great. If you're not going to write the third one, maybe you shouldn't even write the first. Because if you have a story idea that stands on its own and you have this grand plan for afterwards, but you're not going to see it through, then
don't do it.
It's not worth the time to spend on yes, the sequel could do amazing things, but there's no point in quitting halfway through on a sequel. It's a sequel.
Exactly.
You've earned the right to tell a further story in that universe because you've done an original at that point.
Right.
So don't give up on it partway through. See it through to the end.
Right.
If you don't, bad sequel. Particularly because the readers are probably going to want to see the end just as much as you do. But if you don't get there, what? Come on.
On that note, I probably should start writing my will in case anything happens to me. If anything happens to me, all 12 of my readers will be left hanging. And I guess, someone's got to finish it. You finish it! Yeah, I've said this before to you, actually, off air, I think. But yeah, if anything happens to me, for whatever reason, knock on wood there, I'll have you finish
I
it.
thought somebody was coming to visit you. No.
Good one. That's a great joke. Oh, you're so funny. But I trust you.
Honestly, you probably want to hand it to a team because I don't know enough about dinosaurs to do it the way you do. But maybe
I trust you that you would do the research. I feel like you'd give it your all.
Anyway,
I have enough of my plans down that you just fall. I don't think you'd come up with new stories. I mean, unless you wanted to.
Well, no, they'd be separate. I mean, it's kind of like Brian Jake's son suddenly writing Redwall after his father passed. It'd be weird.
Right. I didn't actually hear about that. That's nice.
What?
I knew that Brian Jacques died, but I didn't know his.
I don't
son
know if that happened. I'm just
Right.
using a random example that occurred to mind at the last moment.
Oh, I'm really tired.
Sorry.
To be fair, okay, here's a real example. Christopher Tolkien edited,
Yes.
finished up some of his dad's J.R.R. Tolkien's manuscripts
For the Lost Tales and stuff, I believe.
Yeah, they're not new stories, but he fixed up the manuscripts and added,
Sure.
finished them. That
But
were
yeah.
published before after he died. The Children of Hurry.
Yeah, so yeah, sequels.
One that.
There's probably more to say. If you have any questions, please feel free to, ask us, because we love to answer those. We could probably do it better in an email than a whole nother episode.
Right.
I don't think we need another episode on sequels, do we? The sequel to the sequel episode.
I mean, we could, but it'd be unnecessary.
Completely unnecessary, and I have no reason to see that through. But if they want to send something to us, how would they do that?
They'd email us at mattd@matthewdonaldcareer.com. Don't spell it out. For any questions to come.
Really?
You have...
Don't spell it out.
What
the heck is that?
I'm a writer. I can always spell out my points so eloquently.
I spells the best ever can do.
Okay. I think we broke David, guys.
Your own email system or contact page on Donald's website at the aforementioned web address.
MatthewDonaldCreator.com.
I'm not spelling it out because you can listen to just about every episode ever before this.
Right. And it's on the description anyways.
You also have professional stuffs, right?
Professional Facebook account, at MatthewDonaldCreator. I also have a Twitter at MatthewDonald64. Why 64? Because you.
Well, you could use the 64 months thing that I have there.
I'm feeling lazy this month. Okay, fine. 64 months. I've been working on Megazord for some form or another for 64 months.
Before starting your Twitter account, which is why it's 64.
I feel like actually it's way more than that. 64 months is only 4 or 5 years.
No. I got it. You worked on it for 128 months. And so you divided that in half to come up with a Twitter number. Just because.
Matthew Donald 1 in 28. If I was Matthew Donald at 128, people would be asking more questions. So I can see the logic behind this.
I don't know.
Alright, well, we're putting a conclusive end to this one. No sequels.
I think we told it.
Oh, I just pulled a muscle. Oh, God. Okay, it's going away. We're good. I'm going to keep this in. I'm totally keeping this in. I'm good.
I didn't even hear what you said.
I pulled a muscle on my foot when I was moving with my chair. It's good now. Okay, we're good now.
God.
I suffer from my art, listeners.
I didn't hear what you said, so I'm just like, what the heck are you talking about? I'm keeping this in. Like, what? I don't know. Anyways.
Because I probably screamed so loud that Skype edited it out.
From the wonderful world of the Writ to you listeners, thanks for putting up with our garbage for another
All our
month.
nonsense.
We'll see you next time with more from the Writ, the podcast where us two twits talk about writting.
And we are better than you, against all odds.
Apparently, even though he can't read and I can't talk.
And I can't eloquently say anything, so on the final note, I'm Matt Donald.
And I'm Matt David.
Yeah.
And we'll see you next month. Until then, keep writing.
Until then, yep.